This woman has a shocking story of sexual violence she wants to share, but she's lost her right to tell it.
It's heartbreaking. I just want to be able to share my story and help others, and also for people to understand what kind of person that possibly could be let out in 1 to 2 years' time.
We'll call this brave woman Maggie. And if you're thinking you've heard of others facing the same problem, you're right. Until a few months ago, sexual assault survivors in Tasmania and the Northern Territory couldn't be publicly identified even if they wanted to be. Those laws have since been changed so that survivors who want to speak up can. But while Tassie and the NT were giving sexual assault victims that right, the Victorian government was taking it away. And it seems they did it unintentionally, not as the result of a policy decision, but as a drafting error.
It would appear that what they were trying to do was fiddle with one piece of legislation, and in making some changes there, they have inadvertently stripped sexual assault survivors of the right to tell their own story in cases where there is a conviction.
The change effectively gags Maggie and thousands of other sexual assault survivors in Victoria. Those caught breaking the law could face heavy fines or up to 4 months' jail. Despite that, Maggie's more determined than ever to tell her story, but for now, this is the only way that she can do it, without her name or face.
I lived with my father, not my mother. I was just in constant fear of him, and, you know, I wanted to run away.
Maggie was just 8 when her father started sexually abusing her. The change to the law also prevents us from naming him.
He would put wardrobes up against the windows, and there was just no way that you could get out of the house.
Fearing for her life, Maggie was keen to keep her father's abuse a secret. Years later, she was shocked to learn she wasn't his only victim when her stepsister went to the police.
My father doesn't take kindly to being held accountable for anything. I'm sure that it scared my stepsister, and that she lived in constant fear.
That fear wasn't unwarranted. Just days before Maggie's stepsister was due to testify against him in court, Maggie's father took matters into his own hands.
He ambushed his stepdaughter and shot her 3 times in the head before turning the gun on himself.
Maggie's father survived the murder-suicide attempt.
I actually wasn't allowed to see him in the hospital. I ran past the security guard and made it to the room. And I remember just saying, you know, I hope you die. I really hope you die. But he didn't.
Maggie's father was jailed for 19 years for her stepsister's murder, but crucially, the sexual abuse charges against him were dropped. So when he was granted parole in 2018, Maggie decided it was time she went to the police.
It was a very tough decision, but it was very important to finally have him held accountable for the things that he'd done, and for everyone to pretty much know that the monster that he is.
He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of sexual abuse and was jailed for another 7 years. But on appeal, that sentence was reduced, meaning that Maggie's father could be released in 2022.
Justice was done, and it was taken away from me. I'm so angry. I'm disgusted in the legal system.
Determined to seek justice, Maggie's decided to go public with her story, only to discover she wasn't allowed to.
The very nature of rape is that it takes power and control away from somebody. So to then also lose your voice on top of that, I mean, it's a further form of humiliation.
This woman, who we'll call Melissa, is a rape survivor. She's been sharing her story publicly for years, but not anymore. We can't reveal her identity.
It was not long after the birth of our first son, and that's when the violence started.
Melissa's husband, who was also her carer, continued to sexually assault her for 10 years. Out of fear, she never reported him to the police.
I thought that the only way that I'm going to ever leave this relationship was if I took my life or he was going to take it for me.
That prediction very nearly came true.
I did take an overdose and he left me on the kitchen floor to die. And he'd said numerous times, I will not call an ambulance while you have a heartbeat. My 16-year-old son found me and he called an ambulance. was in the emergency department and they asked me, why did you do this? And I said, my husband's raped me 4 times this week and I can't live like that anymore. And then the police were brought in. That's where everything changed. My world changed.
Melissa's ex-husband was jailed for 2.5 years. He's now out on a community corrections order. Since then, Melissa's become an advocate for sexual assault survivors. But incredibly, she's no longer allowed to do that important work.
Everything that I've done is in danger. I all of a sudden have no visibility again. And, that visibility, has become a huge part of, everything that I do.
Melissa and Maggie are determined to reclaim their voices. They're taking their cases to Victoria's County Court to seek an exemption from the law.
It's an extremely difficult process and it's not cheap either. I mean, we're talking up to $10,000 or more. Why are we financially penalising rape survivors and child sexual abuse survivors who want to be able to tell their stories under their real name?
Victoria's Attorney-General Jill Hennessy declined to be interviewed, but in a statement said the government is urgently looking at whether further changes to the law are needed. Melissa and Maggie are also fronting the Let Us Speak campaign, which is pushing for legal reform.
Everybody needs to have their name. Everybody has the right to, express what's happened to them. If you silence one victim, you silence all of us.
I've lived my life being held back, told no, feeling less than, and that's time to stop. It's about time I reclaimed my story, my life.
Terrifying. Surely, common sense should prevail. Surely they'll change that.
They have to, especially because there's not even an argument about it. This isn't something that the government has tried to achieve. And you think about it, it got through. Obviously, the government's drafting. It got through the opposition. It got through the whole Victorian Parliament, and it just got through.
What do they mean by a drafting error?
So basically, you can seek an exemption from that law, right? And you saw that they're off to the court to do that. The law currently provides that you can get that exemption if you have the consent of the victim, and if you get the court to approve it. That "and" is a mistake. It should say "or." If it says "or," then you have the consent of the victim, that's enough. You don't need to go to the court. It's as simple as that. They got "and" replaced with "or," and that's the result.
I don't understand how it's so hard to change if the intention was that originally. The intention was "or," it is actually "and."
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense.
This should be a lay-down misère. This should happen very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Well, the Victorian Government's full statement is on our website if you want to see it. We'll also find links and more information there about the Let Us Speak campaign. If you do need help, you can reach Lifeline 2 on 13 11 14.